Hello, boys and girls. Got another video for you fine folks on the internet. It's been a little while since I've uploaded any content, but I'm sure you guys know it's always busy, a busy time at the end of the year with the holidays and work and family and all that jazz. But now that things are gelling back into a regular rhythm this year, year in 2022. Hopefully I can get back to a semi-regular upload schedule. So I got, for you fine folks, another installment in the Matthew Buckley Talks music series. Continuing where we left off, looking at some fun surf and hot rod music from the 1960s. So today we have The Little Old Lady from Pasadena by Jan and Dean. Originally released in late 1964 by Liberty Records in the US and Canada. First reissued in the late 70s, I believe, 1978. There was a Japanese import as part of a series they had, The Glory of 60s American Pops, as an abridged LP reissue where they cut a couple tracks out. And there were a few other 1970s abridged LP and cassette reissues that I've not been able to find precise dates or even release years for, but it was reissued again in US and presumably European markets in the mid and late 70s. And then in 1991, it was given its first CD issue as a UK import. And much more recently, in 2012, it was given another Japanese import reissue on CD this time as part of another series, the Rock Famous Recording 999 Best and More. The Japanese have a way with titles. But a little background for anyone who might be unfamiliar with the Titanic twosome, Jan and Dean. Jan Barry and Dean Torrance met while they were junior high school students in Los Angeles, California, and began their musical association a few short years later, harmonizing in the locker rooms after high school football practice. The duo went on to wrangle a few of their classmates into forming the Barons, a short-lived doo-wop group. And most of the group parted ways in a few short months, but Jan and fellow classmate Arnie Ginsberg recorded a string of singles for the Arwen record label. However, by the year's end, Ginsberg was already feeling disenchanted with his brief taste of the music industry, and somewhat fortuitously, Dean Torrance had just returned from a 6-month stint in the military, and once again partnered up with Jan Barry. The duo were shortly later signed to Dore Records, negotiating a contract after that with Liberty Records, and with direction from Herb Alpert and Lou Adler, recorded further doo-wop hits, accumulating 13 top 40 singles between 1958 and 1966. Unlike the average pop group, both Jan and Dean were still part-time students. Torrance majoring in advertising design at USC, while Barry studied both music and medicine at UCLA. Going on to attend the California College of Medicine in 1963. And around that same time, Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys were becoming a phenomenon, jump-starting the popularity of the hot rod and surf music craze. Barry and Wilson would strike up a friendship and collaborate on some of Jan and Dean's most acclaimed cuts, such as Surf City and Dead Man's Curve, each a top 10 hit. So, on to the album itself here, because there's honestly so much background about Jan and Dean. There's enough for more than a couple movies that could be made about their background. But the album itself here, Side A opens with the title track, written by two of Jan's frequent collaborators, Donald Altfeld and Roger Christian. The song lampoons a then prevalent Dodge Motors advertising campaign from early 1964, starring actress Catherine Minner as an elderly woman speeding around the streets of California, daring the viewer to put a Dodge in your garage, honey. Being the jokesters at heart that they were, the song came very easy to Jan and Dean. Jan employed several of the Wrecking Crew, LA's finest studio session musicians, for the recording, including Leon Russell on piano, Hal Blaine and Earl Palmer both on drums, Jimmy Bond and Ray Pullman both on bass guitar, and Bill Pittman, Billy Strange, and Tommy Tedesco all on regular six-string guitars. In addition to Jan and Dean's vocals, P.F. Sloan of the Fantastic Baggies sings the high falsetto vocal part. Released as the duo's 20th 45 RPM single in June of 1964, the single was a massive success, charting at number 3 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the Canadian RPM chart. And it permeated into popular culture. It's been invoked as a punchline by longtime Tonight Show host Johnny Carson for many years. Featured in the Disneyland Resort California Adventure Park. Satirized by punk rock band Dead Kennedys, and ultimately influencing a folk archetype of its own. Used car salesmen assuring prospective buyers whatever car they were interested in has little wear due to being owned by a little old lady from Pasadena who only drove it to church on Sundays. It's a thing. I'm sure kids today don't know, but it's a thing. Aside from being their biggest hit and a cultural touchstone of sorts, it's classic Jan and Dean, a dynamic blend of musical sophistication and irreverent humor. It might cross over and drift into shtick plenty of times, but I just love it. The next track, When It's Over, is credited to Jan's longtime girlfriend Jill Gibson, along with Donald Altfeld and, interestingly enough, Donald's father Horace Altfeld. Released as the B-side of the duo's 22nd 45 RPM single, which charted at number 25 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. The tracking session featured Hal Blaine on drums, Leon Russell on piano, Lyle Ritz on doubled bass guitar, and Glenn Campbell and Tommy Tedesco both on guitars. Tedesco's guitar also doubled. Vocal, string, and woodwind overdubs would feature the Sid Sharp strings, and all arrangements would be by Jan himself. In my opinion, these are among the sweetest vocals Jan would commit to tape during the classic Jan and Dean run. One of my personal favorites for sure. And the next track, Horace, the swingin' school bus driver, is credited to Steve Barry and P.F. Sloan of the Fantastic Baggies, Jan and Dean's frequent backup vocalists. The lyrics describe a fictional and exaggerated caricature of Jan and Dean collaborator Donald Altfeld's father, Horace, and his peculiarities and antics as a very hip bus driver. I especially like the lyric about how he knows every cop in town and is always shutting them down. It's goofy stuff. There's another good line about how the kids are always jumping up and down because he keeps the radio blasting on the hits station. It's good stuff. The arrangement is just as fun and adventurous as the song's concept. Lots of horns and woodwinds, all over a very lively rhythm. Again, we get the dual drumming of Hal Blaine and Earl Palmer. Pardon me. And you gotta love the ending horn blaring like a bus horn. It's silly but clever. And also worth noting that the real Horace Altfeld was also president of the Jan and Dean fan club for a number of years. So obviously there was a great deal of affection in this dedication. Sip of tea here quick. And the next track, Old Ladies Seldom Power Shift, is credited to both Jan Berry and Dean Torrance, but features neither of the two on the track, as it's a surf rock instrumental. From what I understand, Jan wrote the music, and Dean's credit comes from titling the track. It's nothing mind-blowing. The guitar isn't exactly ripping, but it's solid. It's a solid and groovy jam, all things considered. Not too much to say about it, though. Of course, the instrumentation is supplied by LA's finest studio musicians, the Wrecking Crew. And the following track, Sidewalk Surfin', was released as Jan and Dean's 22nd 45 RPM single in October of 1964, charting at number 25. Credited to Brian Wilson and Roger Christian, Berry had approached the pair about rewriting a song they had already written for the Beach Boys about surfing called Catch a Wave. The duo complied and produced Sidewalk Surfin', an early skateboarding anthem. Once again, the arrangement is full of horns. It's a fun, free sound, much like the fun, free feeling of skateboarding. And I don't think the basic track is the exact same basic track as the Beach Boys' Catch a Wave, but they did a very faithful recreation. If someone out there knows if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I do believe it's a new recording for the basic track. Obviously, the overdubs are new. In any case, it's a great song, and once again, and is an example of a Jan and Dean track that, in some ways, almost became larger than the duo themselves. And with that, we end Side 1. Side 2 opens with the Anaheim, Azusa, and Cucamonga Sewing Circle Book Review and Timing Association, which was released as the B-side of the duo's 21st 45 RPM single, charting at number 77 on the U.S. Billboard charts. Another classic Jan and Dean song, this pushes both the absurd humor and musical sophistication of Little Old Lady before it into high gear. Right from the beginning, we have incredibly tightly arranged vocals with daring and diverse instrumentation, multiple guitars, including 12-string guitar and 6-string bass guitar, 2 standard bass guitar parts, 2 drummers, tack piano, harpsichord, auxiliary percussion, including bells and timpani, and we get oboe, trumpet, bassoon, and French horn. Such a dense musical arrangement and acrobatic vocals make this a standout, ambitious song by any standard. Both the intro and the outro of the song are based on an old German Christmas chorale that had been harmonized by Bach in various formats. That's niche. And all this that I've said is without getting into the shtick of the song being about these old ladies that tool around in their Grand Prix and all that. You know, it's silly stuff, but you gotta love it. And the next track, It's Easy as 1, 2, 3, was released as the B-side of the duo's 24th 45 RPM single in April of 1965, which charted at number 27 on the U.S. Billboard charts. Credited to Jill Gibson and Donald Altfeld, the song actually features Jill duetting with Jan. And it's a stellar production. Bright horns color the track, yet it somehow maintains a relaxed energy as the pair sing about the end of summer and about the end of romance. As much as I love both Jan and Dean's vocals, Jill Gibson is a much more skilled vocalist than either of them ever were. So to hear her guest on their record is a treat. Jan actually produced a solo version of this track for Jill Gibson with some slightly different lyrics. And that was released on Imperial Records in September of 1964. Honestly, in my opinion, it's a shame that the pair never explored more duets while they were a functioning couple. It would have been very cool to get some Jan and Jill side projects, I think. In any case, this is all to say that I immensely love the song. Definitely a highlight of the album. And the next track, Move Out Little Mustang, is credited to Jan Berry, Roger Christian, and Brian Wilson. A nod to the newest sports car of Ford Motor Company. We're treated to another bright, very bright horn arrangement and confident bass vocals from Jan. The additional vocal presence of the Fantastic Baggies can definitely be very strongly felt throughout the track. And Jill Gibson herself provides the spoken interlude in the middle of the song, which is always a nice touch with these sorts of songs. And the track had actually originally been produced by Jan for the Rally Packs, a short-lived pseudonym for Steve Barry and P.F. Sloan. And it was also, that 45 was also issued by Imperial Records, and that would have been in May of 1964. In any format, this is a good, fun song, if not quite a highlight of the album. And the following track, Skateboarding Part 2, is credited to Jan Berry and Jill Gibson, but again, features neither of the two, as once more we are treated to an instrumental. A bit more high energy than the instrumental on the previous side. The melody of Frere Jacques is blended with zipping guitar riffs and mixed with actual skateboard sound effects. For the curious, Skateboarding Part 1 was featured on Jan and Dean's Ride the Wild Surf LP the previous month. The next track, One Piece Topless Bathing Suit, was written by Donald Altfeld with Steve Barry and P.F. Sloan. Originally recorded and released by the Ripcords as a 45 RPM single produced by Bruce Johnston, who would go on to join the Beach Boys. And that came out in July of 1964, so a few months prior to this, on Columbia Records. Originally written about a toddler, a 4-year-old toddler on the beach, Jan and Dean's version is somewhat altered to tell the exploits of a 94-year-old granny on the beach. Again, classic Jan and Dean shtick. All silliness aside, the song opens with a killer riff, just oozing with hype for what's about to come. And the vocals are tight, delivered with swagger, confidence, and, of course, a heaping helping of irreverence. And with that, we end side 2. So, final thoughts, this is arguably one of the strongest full-length albums of the classic 60s Jan and Dean run, featuring 3 of their top 40 hit singles, and a breadth of diverse album cuts as well. Classic surf and hot rod anthems and instrumental jams sit side by side with more reserved, even tender ballads. Songs with lush orchestration and sophisticated arrangements are intersped with high-energy rock and roll romps. And in each kind of track, we see the development of Jan Berry as a composer, arranger, and producer. Definitely not to be overlooked is his efforts as a composer. Due to conflicting contracts, Jan was not credited for all of his compositional work, and in this case, he was not credited for his compositional contributions to the title track of this album, The Little Old Lady from Pasadena, until after a 2002 court settlement. And I would also be remiss if I were to leave out mentions of the 2 tracks cut from this abridged reissue here. They cut out a cover of Chuck Berry's Memphis, originally sequenced as the second track between Little Old Lady and When It's Over from side 1. And then one of my favorite songs from the LP, Summer Means Fun, written by Steve Barry and P.F. Sloan, was cut from side 2, originally sequenced between the Anaheim, Azusa, Cucamonga, Sewing Circle, Book Review, and Timing Association, and It's Easy as 1, 2, 3. Which actually I didn't even realize when I was making my notes for this, but both of those are the second song on each side, so interesting that they would just cut the second song from each side, but oh well. The duo, it's worth noting that Jan and Dean had already recorded a cover of Memphis on the Surf City and Other Swingin' Cities LP in 1963. But they had updated the song for this newer issue. And Summer Means Fun. It is a perfect surf anthem. I adore the lyric. She's a mighty fine girl now, but I'd rather be shooting the curl now. That's so silly, but so good. It's a perfect surf anthem. It would sound right at home in the Beach Boys songbook. And on that note, Bruce Johnston and Terry Melcher actually co-produced a 45 RPM single of the song as Bruce and Terry in June of 1964. So they had cut, that's close to a Beach Boys version, right? But the Little Old Lady album spent about 20 weeks on the U.S. Billboard album charts and 11 weeks on the U.S. Cashbox chart, peaking at number 40 on each. So, one way or another, it's definitely one of the strongest and one of the most successful projects Jan and Dean had put out. Here's a bit of a closer look at the cover here. A nice shot of the boys standing side by side of Catherine Minner, the woman who personified the little old lady from Pasadena, playing her in the Dodge advertisements and also at public events that Jan and Dean were involved in, because it really turned into a nice promotional deal for everyone involved. Jan and Dean had their hit song that referenced something people already knew, and Dodge Motors suddenly had a nice promotional song for their car, and they could send this lady out at events, and it worked out for everybody. And you gotta love here some of the design on this cover. You have very nice lettering for the title cut and a couple of the other tracks. And then as they list the very lengthy, wordy title of the Anaheim, Azusa, and Cucamonga Sewing Circle Book Review and Timing, it just kind of trails off. That's clever. That's good. I love it. And this here, we actually have the hype sticker still on there. It's a Liberty value. I think that's pretty cool. I like those things. Back cover's nothing crazy. Great picture of Jan and Dean getting run down by Catherine Minner, saying, you'll get a real bang out of this album, honey. And there's some silly liner notes that I assume are from Dean, because he's a jokester like that. It's a cool picture of Jan and Dean riding tandem on a skateboard, which seems like it would be a terrible idea. Track list, of course. A couple other credits. And actually, since I have it here, this is the reissue, one of the miscellaneous 70s reissues, obviously, since it's abridged and it's a stereo copy. I also have here an original 1964 mono copy, unabridged, as you can see, with the full track sequence. And whoever owned this record before me felt like marking the instrumental tracks so they wouldn't forget. But a closer look here at the album itself. I guess might as well take a look at the mono one first. Liberty sleeve from the 60s. Classic 60s Liberty Records label with the rainbow and the gold Statue of Liberty. It's good stuff. And the 70s reissue is on a different Liberty label, since it's a reissue. We get the gray 70s Liberty label. Not quite as fun. They do at least still sneak a rainbow in there, even if they shrunk down the graphic for the Statue of Liberty. It's fine. B-side. So even though this, I wouldn't say this is my favorite Jan and Dean LP, I can definitely, I don't argue with people when they make the case for this being their strongest or even the best, even though I personally think that they did things that are more interesting. This is them at their peak, as their star was still rising. This was just before the teenage music International, the Tammy Show that Jan and Dean hosted, featuring, among other acts, the Rolling Stones, James Brown, and the Beach Boys. Those guys that everybody thinks Jan and Dean were just trying to copy. But no, this is a fantastic album. I highly recommend it for anyone that's interested in diving into surf and hot rod music beyond just the Beach Boys, as these guys, did it better than any of their imitators. And by God, they had a hell of a lot of fun doing it. There's a lot to laugh about throughout not just this album, but most of their albums. So let me, I almost forgot a rating. I would definitely rate this. If I was rating the abridged version, I'd say 8 out of 10. But if I was rating the full-length version, which that's what we'll go for, 9 out of 10 for Little Old Lady from Pasadena. It's killer, it's classic, it's good stuff. So let me know in the comments below. Are you familiar with Jan and Dean? You've probably at least heard Surf City or Dead Man's Curve. Without even knowing it, thinking it's the Beach Boys or something. But yeah, are you familiar with Jan and Dean? Are you familiar with the Little Old Lady from Pasadena? I'd love to hear any anecdotes or anything in the comments section below. So hit me with your questions and hit me with your stories that I, would just love. And yeah, keep tuning in, because I'll keep these coming at you, especially now that, as I said at the beginning, that our schedules are returning to a bit of normalcy post-holiday. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate any and all viewership. And yeah, this has been Matthew Buckley Talks Music with The Little Old Lady from Pasadena by Jan and Dean. Music is the best.